What's going on, everyone? You're listening to the Brazos Sports Preps Cast. I'm Alex Miller, joined always by Abigail Ochoa. Abigail, they might as well deem this a holiday on the Texas high school football calendar, or just the high school sports calendar in general in Texas. It's UIL realignment day.
Yeah, well, it was literally a holiday for schools around here with the snow and the weather coming in. So it felt like a real holiday in the sense that it probably should be every year.
Yeah, well, for those who are not familiar, the UIL, which is the governing body of high school sports in Texas, they reassign districts to all high school sports teams in the state every other year, so every 2 years. And so it's a big deal, especially in the world of football, where you've got coaches meeting up all across the state. Well, not as much this time around because of the weather, but traditionally you got coaches meeting up. They're trying to get their schedules filled. They're figuring out who they're going to play for the next 2 years. And so it's kind of a crazy, chaotic whirlwind of a day for a lot of people across the state in the high school sports world. So let's just jump into it. We'll go kind of district by district and kind of give some thoughts on just kind of the where these teams are sitting, and just kind of maybe some thoughts of what we've heard from some coaches that been able to talk to. Abigail's been on the phones today calling some of the area coaches. A good Robert Cessna, he's on the phones as well. So yeah, we'll just kind of go district by district. We'll start in Class 6A. Of course, there's only one Brazos Valley team, local team in Class 6A, and that's the Bryan Vikings. They're staying in District 12 with Coppers Cove, Colleen Harker Heights, Temple, some usual suspects that they've seen the last couple of years, but they're also adding Hutto and Pflugerville Weiss in Waco Midway, kind of forming kind of a new Central Texas district where you've got some teams that are moving up and down and around, and so some familiar faces, but in familiar territory, but also some new faces as well. And Abigail, I think you just got off the phone with new Bryan coach Ricky Tullis.
Yeah, I talked to both Tullis and Rogers today just to kind of get Rogers obviously is retiring after this season, but he's been with Bryan. He's been in the Central, Texas region with the Vikings and playing with them. And also Tullis, coming in this season, kind of getting a new challenge, not only coming to Bryan, another 6A school, but getting kind of, like you said, this mixed matched district that we have here. Rogers was mentioning that it's a lot. It's odd almost in the way of like, they'll be going to Colleen and those, towns over there, but then you got Hutto and Pflugerville and Waco. Like, it's just a lot of, they're going to get the miles in pretty much wherever they go. So it was just kind of interesting, but I think it should be fun. They get rid of Belton, who's really good, Shoemaker, Colleen Ellison. And then you get, Pflugerville Weiss had a really good season in 5A last year. I think they went undefeated in district. They finished top. Hutto and Waco Midway, Rogers was saying they've had tough years the past few years. College Station has played them in non-district, and we've kind of seen what they can do there, but he did say that he thinks they're just going to get better. They have good coaches to kind of get them there too. And I think Tullis is really, he said he's excited to just kind of get started. When he started at Pearland 4 years ago, his first season, they went 10-2 and they won the district title. He has a pretty good record at going like that. And I think, depending on the type of guys that Bryan brings back, how these other teams rack up with the people that they lost, the people that they're also returning. I think it could be really good to see Bryan kind of not only come back with a new head coach, but come back in this new district and really make a name for themselves here too.
Yeah, I think this is kind of what we thought would happen with Bryan. For a few years, they had gone south to some of the Cypress schools. In years past, they've been kind of linked with the Conroe area schools, the Woodlands. We should just note in general, especially for the bigger schools in Bryan College Station, it's kind of in a fringe zone, kind of a no man's land. You're going to go north to Central Texas, kind of that Waco area where we've seen Bryan go? A lot of times, sometimes they go south or sometimes even east. So, they're kind of the four schools here, they're kind of in this fringe area where they could go a number of different ways. And we certainly saw that today, as we'll get to here in a few minutes. But,
Yeah.
I think Bryan's district got a little harder. They lost three of the four district mates that they beat last year, with Shoemaker, Colleen, and Ellison dropping down to 5A. And Waco Midway, they had a really tough year last year, but that's a really good program. And you think about adding a district champion in Pflugerville Weiss, and Hutto made the playoffs too.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a pretty solid district all around, all things considered. And, it's another tough draw too, being paired with that district with Cedar Hill, DeSoto, and Duncanville. Bryan gave Cedar Hill all they could handle in that bi-district round last year, but that's just kind of the nature of the beast up in 6A, especially when you're in that region too, going up on those DFW schools. So, the future's bright in Bryan a little bit, but they're certainly going to have their work cut out for them over there as well. So moving down to Class 5A, 5A Division I, we knew College Station A&M Consolidated would be reunited, and it was official today. They're in District 11, 5A Division I. This is one that I think got us by surprise when you look at it. They're in this North Austin district with Cedar Park, Georgetown Eastview, Leander Glen, and Pflugerville Hendrickson. Abigail, you and I we've talked, and we've talked with other people. We kind of thought maybe they were gonna go into this Central Texas kind of district, or maybe
Like
even
Colleen.
kind of with Colleen, like Belton coming up to 5A Division I, one of the Waco schools. But they send them to North Austin. I mean, when you think about that Central Texas kind of district, they put those teams in Region 1. These guys are moving to Region 3. I don't think we really expected that. Well, what Coach Huff kind of have to say about all that?
Yeah, I mean, he said he wasn't surprised, and I think nobody can really be, coaches try to figure out like what region, what district they're going to be in, during the off season, during these years of realignment, but you can never be sure. So it's like expect the unexpected pretty much. And I think that's what happened this year with College Station and Consol. He said he wasn't surprised, but it's going to be a lot of travel for them. I mean, he mentioned, it's pretty much just Consol and College Station by themselves over here. Whereas, Cedar Park, Georgetown, all those other schools have maybe played each other in non-district or just familiar with each other, and they're closer to each other over there. So it'll definitely be a little different. As far, I mean, College Station gets a completely new district, and none of these teams, previously, but I think it's really exciting to see Consol and College Station back in the same district. They haven't been there since 2017. We saw last week with that basketball game how this rivalry is very much alive in every other sport. And to get it back in football, this is obviously a big football town just in general. And I think that's really exciting to see that kind of return, and Fedor and Huff, mentioned that they're pretty excited about reigniting that. And, it's just an in-town rivalry, good old thing. But yeah, it's definitely a weird spot. I guess I didn't expect them to be here. Huff said that he maybe thought that they would go to Colleen in that kind of district, like you said, with the Belton and Shoemakers kind of moving up there. But I mean, they get pretty good competition up here. I mean, you got Cedar Park, Georgetown, both of them went pretty deep in the playoffs. Obviously, College Station and Consol did as well. And the Leander schools didn't do as well last season. Hendrickson didn't either, but also another good program. And then Eastview, you get them too. So just interesting, but I don't know if anybody expected it.
Yeah, I think this is actually a pretty good draw for College Station and Consol. First of all, they get into Region 3, which, when you think about College Station, we said it over and over again the last couple of years. Yeah. At Region 2 is just so brutally tough. There's no more Denton Ryan. There's no more Highland Park. There's no more Frisco or Lone Star. Secondly, when you get into Region 3, they kind of avoided being paired with that loaded District 10. You've got the Magnolia schools, you got Friendswood, Manville, Angleton. I mean, that's just a murderer's row of teams right there.
Well,
Uh,
that's what's so weird too with
yeah,
Magnolia, kind of going the other way. I mean, they just, Huff mentioned that too. It's just kind of odd. Just kind of, it's funny when realignment comes out. You're just kind of, some things are unexpected like this, and then some things you're like, oh well, I figured that would happen. But yeah, Magnolia too kind of got a weird draw there too.
yeah, and of course, if College Station and Consol made it to the playoffs, of course you'd likely see a lot of those teams in the later rounds of the
Oh
playoffs.
yeah.
But certainly gives you maybe more manageable, advantageous first and even second round games.
Yeah.
Kind of big picture though, kind of looking at 5A Division One, it's full of a lot of good teams, but I think it's way more balanced when you look at how they've spread some of these schools out. Denton Ryan's off to Region One. Of course, there's big news about them being in the same district as Aledo that's coming up to Division One. That's a big
Yeah.
deal. Highland Park's off to 6A, so they're not even in the 5A
Mhm.
picture anymore. College Station moving over into Region 3. I mean, that's kind of a big deal. They've been one of the big guys over there in Region 2 for a few years. And what's interesting is how College Station's really been with these East Texas DFW region schools, and now Consol and College Station, it's basically flipped for them, considering they're in this Austin area district with teams they've really not played much before. And when you think about playoffs, they're likely to see some San Antonio area teams in the first or second rounds. You look at that District 12 with Bernie Champion and Smithson Valley. Those are two really good programs coming from the San Antonio area. So, definitely a very different landscape, especially for College Station. A little more familiar probably for Consol, considering they're still in Region 3 and had been all along. But,
Mhm.
it's interesting how, like we said, Brazos Valley kind of in this fringe area where a lot of these regions meet, and, College Station and Consol kind of see where that can take them in a number of different ways.
Yeah, and College Station, they get through that Region 2 this year. They get through that gauntlet and they go to state, and then in realignment they go to Region 3. It's just like, oh, but yeah, I like you said, I do think they have a good chance in this district here. I mean, and we'll obviously see. I'm obviously not too familiar with these teams because I haven't had to be, but yeah, we'll see how it is.
Yeah, moving down to 5A Division 2, Brenham and Rudder, they're going to meet up in the same district in District 10
Yeah.
alongside Huntsville, Montgomery Lake Creek, Richmond, Randall, which is a newer school, and
Mhm.
Lamar Consolidated. A lot of familiar teams in this district with kind of Rudder, Huntsville, the Montgomery schools, and Lamar Consolidated. This one seems about right. A lot of the similar familiar suspects here. Kind of tough for Brenham having to move over to Region 3 from Region 4. But they're still looking for a new football coach. Richmond Randall, of course, they're a new school. We'll see how they adjust to the 5A football. They've only got 3 grades in school for the next school year.
Yeah, this is
Go ahead.
I was gonna say this will be their first year playing varsity football. Last
Yeah,
year was their first year playing junior varsity football, and this year, because the school's only been at school for 2 years. So
right.
yeah.
So, you just did you get a chance to talk to Coach Izar today?
I did. And I think, out of all the local schools, at least, this district was pretty tame as far as like teams remaining and teams going. I think we kind of expected it to be like this, with Consol was like the big one who kind of left, and then Houston Fulshire kind of got knocked off with Brenham and Randall coming in here. But, Izar said it's pretty much, in his mind, pretty much the same as it was. Brenham kind of replaces Consol in that fact, two good programs. So, they lose Consol, but then they get Brenham. They get the Cubs who have been doing pretty well the past 2 years, obviously looking for a head coach now. And then you get Randall, who he said is kind of like a Houston Fulshire, kind of like a newer school kind of coming in, but he thinks that they could be really good in this first year. So yeah, I think out of at least the local ones, this one kind of moved the least. They still have to go to Huntsville. They still have to go to those Montgomery schools. Montgomery won district championship last year. I mean, these are big schools that are going to bring back good guys again. So he said, just, hopefully we're ready for that type of competition and we can make it to the playoffs again like we did this year. So, and then they get, I know we haven't talked about volleyball and basketball yet, but that district, Consol, Rudder, and College Station, they're all in the same district again, this time 21-5A instead of 19-5A. And then they do get those Montgomery and Montgomery Lake Creek in that district too. So it'll be interesting how that'll kind of change a little bit, because those schools are, just good schools in general for all different types of sports. And I think that'll add some competition there that maybe we haven't seen. And those schools won't have to travel as far. I mean, they were traveling to those Katie Jordan and Katie Paychow, Waller, which is not that far, but those kind of get knocked out when you add in Lake Creek and Montgomery. And it's only 8 teams instead of 9.
Yeah, they haven't released the baseball districts yet, but if that is the baseball district with 3 local schools plus Brenham, the Magnolia schools, and the Montgomery schools, I mean, that is a incredibly difficult baseball district. And the fact that there's only going to be 4 of those teams that make it into the playoffs, that's going to be just a tough pill to swallow for a couple of schools, probably.
Oh, yeah. It's hard to imagine that, but I'm sure that's exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah. So moving down to Class 4A, now that we're into kind of our area schools, we'll just kind of meander around some of the big notes of the day. But we'll start with Navasota because this is kind of an interesting draw. They move up to Division 1. They're in District 12, so that's Region 3, moving over from Region 4. They've got El Campo. They've got a new school down in Alvin. They've got Needville and Stafford. We know El Campo is probably going to be pretty good next year, considering they've got Ruben Owens at running back, and he's one of the top prospects of the state. Kind of looking around though, I think it's kind of a good draw of a region for Navasota when you look at it holistically. I know C's got a chance to talk with Coach Dacus down in Navasota, and he told me that Navasota is gonna have a bye for the last week. So gonna have a different little look of a schedule than maybe what they're used to down in Navasota. But pretty good draw. But unfortunately, you've got one of the best teams in the state with one of the best players in the state in your same district. But we know Navasota, they're not shy for a good fight.
That is true. And they've changed areas the past few years, at least. I know 4 years ago they were in like a Houston area based, and then obviously the past 2 years they've been in the Cuero and the Giddings and all those schools there. They've done well, I think, with adapting to those, but yeah, it's definitely going to be different this time around. And then, I mean, Caldwell gets their district and gets Navasota's district there, which I think is going to be, it's going to be tough for the Hornets. Obviously, they had a tough year, but you never know who they're going to bring back and things like that. So.
Yeah, Caldwell, of course, moving up to 4A Division 2. Madisonville, they're moving over to Region 3 in 4A Division 2. No more Carthage. I'm sure they're okay with that. Carthage, of course, one of the mainstay powers there in that classification. Okay, here we go. This is the big one. We were kind of expecting this down in 3A Division 1. It's official. Franklin and Lorena, they are in the same district, both the 2 defending state champions in Class 3A, both now in the same division. It happened, and we were expecting it. But then when you look at the rest of the district, they got Cameron Yo and Academy and McGregor and Rockdale and Troy. I mean, this is the district in 3A Division 1. It really is.
Yeah. Yeah, if anybody had, I mean, we'll see what Franklin can do, but if anybody had a doubt as to, how good Franklin is, I mean, taking down this district schedule is gonna just show it immensely. But yeah, it's a crazy schedule when you kind of look at it. Like, I don't know how they're gonna plan that out really. But it just seems like week to week to week, it's just gonna be a battle And then especially when you get to Lorena, I mean, I'm sure this has happened before, but I mean, to have two defending state champions in the same district, playing against each other, that's going to be really exciting and a big game to go to.
Yeah, it should be noted that did happen in 4A too. Stephenville and China Spring, they're going to be in the same district. Yeah. And I think I saw on Twitter that Franklin's actually going to play China Spring in a scrimmage.
Okay.
I'm really curious who Franklin's going to schedule in their non-district games, because if we know anything about how they've done that the last couple of years, I mean, they really play some teams. I mean, they've played some really Lorena. Good. They played Lorena. They played Cameron Yo. They played Hearn. They don't shy away, and that certainly really helped them as the year went on in both seasons, especially last year. Coach Fannin really pointing back to how they beat Lorena in a really tight game. They cruised through the regular season, cruised through a lot of the playoffs, and then finally when they got to Gunner, he said, hey, we got to point back to week 1 to finish here in week 16, 17. And sure enough, that helped them. So
well, yeah, and it's interesting. It's kind of like, they kind of already have a rivalry in a sense with Lorena, having played them the past years in non-district, which I think is unusual. Usually your rival is probably someone actually in your district, and Franklin obviously did have one, but yeah, it's kind of interesting. They already have this history of trying to beat each other for that top spot of, bragging rights and things like that. Obviously, Lorena won the first matchup by 1 point, and then Franklin wins last season by 7, and they both go on to win the state championship. So kind of an interesting dynamic that they already have there.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised either to see all 4 playoff teams from this district make it to the 3rd round and playing rematches against each other. This is definitely the strongest district in that region. And it's really loaded for sure. Moving down to 3A Division 2, pretty similar districts as we've seen the last couple years for Anderson, Shiro, and Lexington. Anderson, Shiro, they're still in Region 3 with a lot of those very deep East Texas teams. You got Hemphill, Kunci, New Waverly, Newton, Trinity, and Warren. And then Lexington, pretty similar. They lose Academy and they lose Franklin, but they've still got Buffalo, Clifton, Florence, and Rogers, and they're adding Elkhart. So pretty status quo for the most part in those parts of the world. Down to 2A Division 1, we've got the 3 Leon County schools, Centerville, Leon, and Normandy. They're in the same district there with Corrigan, Camden, who we've seen some teams play some non-district games against, and then Groveton, who had been in that district with them. 5-team district. That means only one team's not going to the playoffs. I'm sure those schools are okay with that. And then, you go over to Region 4. This one's interesting, okay? Hearn's in this kind of, it's kind of going north to south. It's kind of like this kind of column almost, when you've got Flatonia, Holland, Schulenburg, Thorndale, Thrall, Weimar. I mean, that's just an interesting assortment of schools when you kind of look at the geography of it, at least.
Yeah, and Hearn is going to be going through kind of a rebuilding phase of I mean, they're losing big guys up front, and Keyshawn Langham, I think he's a junior maybe.
Right.
So maybe he'll
losing
come back.
Jabari Dunn though.
Jabari Dunn, Stephen Kraft Mitchell, Anthony Jackson. I mean, you're using big guys up there. So yeah, it's obviously a new district for them, but also they're trying to rebuild as well.
Well, down in 2A Division 2, I bet it's all smiles in Bremond, Texas today, because you know why, Abigail? You know who's not in that district?
Should we have a drum roll for this? I feel like there you go, Mart.
Yeah, I think as our friend from the Waco Trib, Bryce Cherry, said, Bremond and Chilton are big winners today because they are no longer in a district with Mart. They're also in Region 4, so that's kind of a shift. It's kind of interesting because we've got a good number of teams in 2A, especially 2A Division 2 here in the Brazos Valley, and they're kind of scattered among 2 different districts. When you look at Bremond, Iola, and Milano kind of being up there, in District 13, and then down in 14, you've got Burton, Snook, and Somerville. And it's interesting to see where each district goes. They kind of like go opposite ways of each other in a way. Um, you know, Burton, that's in Snook and Somerville, a tough draw there with Falls City being in that district. Burton, they played Falls City there in the what was it, the regional final, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Falls City, they went to the state championship and they ended up losing, I think, to Stratford all the way up in the Panhandle. But you know, kind of that's going to be a lot of traveling there too for a Snook. I mean, you think about Snook and where I don't know, I think it's Runge.
Runge, probably.
Yeah, it's that they're pretty far from each other. So a little bit of traveling there as well. And then wrapping it up in the football world, down in 1A Division 2, Calvert and Dimebox, they're in a 14 district with Buckholtz and Oglesby. So there you have it. That's all of our teams. I think we covered all of them. So
it's a lot, but it's realignment day. So
yep, our heads are swirling, and I bet the coaches are swirling even more. So
I'm sure.
Well, this is kind of a fun day getting to see, mapping out where it's going. I think I tweeted earlier, as the coaches are filling out their schedules, I'm looking ahead to where I could get a good meal. So I think that the Austin area teams certainly play that benefits my my future meals down the road.
That's true. We don't usually get to go over there until the playoffs. So
yeah. Well, Abigail, I think that's going to do it for us.
Yeah, but another busy day after signing day. I mean, so yeah, it's really exciting. I think, it'll be interesting to see kind of how these districts play out once the football actually starts. But just looking at it today, I mean, it's a pretty exciting day. And I think a lot of teams are, you're either excited, confused, or really happy. So we'll see.
Well, that's going to do it for us on this episode of the Brazos Sports Prepscast. Be sure to check theeagle.com for all of our coverage from UIL realignment and thoughts and comments from area coaches. So we'll see y'all soon. But until then, later.